Hey guys, Dave with the First Place Auto Parts. Thanks for joining me in the studio today. You know, ever since I was a young boy, I loved automobile racing, motorsports. And in the United States of America, we are blessed to have a ton of different types of automobile racing, but which ones are the favorites? Which ones are the best ones to go see in person? Look, television has changed how we watch motorsports. The coverage today, it's so good that really you don't have to go, but there's nothing like going to the racetrack, being there in person and hearing those cars strut their stuff and do their thing. But in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the best spectator sports to go see in person here in the United States. And there's some criteria I'm going to use. This is my opinion. I have a feeling you might feel the same way, but if you don't, please let me know in the comment section of this. I'm open to ideas, but these are going to be my favorite spectator sports, and I'll tell you what, they're going to make a lot of sense by the time we're done with this video, and you might be surprised which one ends up being number one. So guys, stay tuned today. We're talking about the best spectator sports to go see when it comes to car racing. Now this is a pretty broad subject. There's a lot of opportunity because we have a lot of different car racing here in the United States of America with a lot of different types of tracks and different types of vehicles. The criteria that I'm going to use to judge the best from the, I don't say the worst, but the least friendly to go watch in person is going to be, the first thing is going to be accessibility. How many tracks are there to actually go see to be a spectator at a racetrack of its kind? And can you get there without a lot of travel? The other is going to be, is it engaging? Is it exciting to watch? Is it new and different every time you go to see it? Third thing is going to be the interaction with the drivers and the cars themselves. Do you have access to the drivers? Do you have access to the cars if you want to walk through the pits and take a closer look at them? And the fourth thing is going to be the cost. How much does it cost to get into one of these races? So that's going to be our criteria today, guys. And right off the bat, I'm going to have to go ahead and disqualify certain types of racing. The first one's going to be F1. Formula One racing is typically held, each race is held at a different country, which really limits its accessibility. And to be honest with you, well, you just really can't see much from the stands. So that one's right off the list. The second one is going to be any kind of drifting event, because quite honestly, drifting, while it takes a phenomenal amount of talent, isn't really a race. And the third thing is going to be rally racing. Not so big here, more popular in Europe, but the reality is at a rally course, typically you can only see one aspect of it. You have to stand along the course somewhere, and you really don't have the ability to move around, move further down the course. As a matter of fact, it could be dangerous to move around. So those three types of motorsports are automatically off the list. So let's go ahead and start with the first one, and that is going to be what we call stock car racing. So a lot of people call it a NASCAR racing, but the reality is stock car racing at the local level, there's a lot of tracks and there's a lot of opportunity to go see it. Stock car racing is probably one of the more popular forms of automobile racing in the United States. There are over 900 paved ovals in the United States, which means you can find a racetrack in pretty much any location without driving more than an hour's time. The reality is over 8 million people are spectators, both on from television, but also in the stands every year. Again, coverage with NASCAR, it tends to be almost primarily television, but if your local short track races and intermediate track races, you get a lot of crowds, you get a lot of fans. Now, stock car racing has changed a lot from back in the 80s and the 90s. Today, it's not almost really recognizable. The only thing that you can correlate between today's racing and racing back when stock car was insanely popular is that they turn left. But the reality is the distances of the races, the cars, and the drivers in particular have changed a lot. But stock car racing remains very popular to this day. Look, you tend to sit in the stands of a stock car race and you stay where you're at. The opportunity for interaction with the drivers and the cars is really nil, especially on some of your smaller tracks where there's almost not enough room for all the cars and the trucks and the trailers, let alone spectators. There are some tracks that let you inside, but the reality is you just can't really get that close to the drivers or the cars with a lot of frequency. The wonderful thing about most of your local stock car racing is that the entry fees to get in, 10 to 15 bucks in most cases, so it's pretty cheap. A lot of places let you bring a cooler so you can cut down on your eating bill or your food bill while you're there, and overall it gives you a good example of motorsports in America. Now, the movie Talladega Nights, I'm not sure it did stock car racing any favors. People tend to be pigeonholed in regards to the type of person that wants a stock car race, but stock car racing takes a lot of skill and it takes a lot of dedication. And with those 900 tracks spread all across this country, there's a lot of people that put a lot of sweat and time and energy into bringing a race car or a stock car to the racetrack. Stock car racing is a good form of motorsports racing to go watch, but it's not the best. It's limited in regards to where you're seating is typically where you sit. So you have a view of the whole track, but really you can see a certain part of the track really well, where the rest of it gets a little fuzzy, especially with me as my eyes tend to get a little bit older. Also, stock car racing, for me, it's hard to tell who's winning the race after about the 4th or 5th lap. After that, if the race is 20 to 50 laps long, I can't tell who's winning or who's losing. All I can see is that there's racing going on and some passing. So from a spectator standpoint, stock car racing for me isn't the best, but the next one is interesting, and that's drag racing. Now, drag racing, unlike stock car racing, is literally very much an interpersonal sport. For starters, when you walk through the gate, you're walking through the pits typically, and those pits are going to be a 1/4 mile long because they run the whole course of the drag strip. The drag strip is 1,320 feet long, or a 1/4 mile. So you get really up close and personal with the cars and even the drivers while they're wrenching on the cars. So the interaction part of it is off the charts. From the standpoint of viewability, you can sit typically anywhere in the stands, whether it's the starting line or the finish line, get a feel for speed or for the launch at a drag strip all the way down that 1/4 mile. So as far as the accessibility to the track and the interaction, it's huge. Also, because of the diversity of the cars, like you can have 15-second cars or you can have 8-second cars. The race itself is over pretty quickly, and there's a new one starting behind it every couple of seconds. So the actual visibility, the excitement, and the engagement is massive. Also, where else can you go see a car do a burnout, maybe have the front wheels off of the ground at the start, and finish with a parachute? Drag racing is something where you're going to be on your feet a lot because you're going to go out into the pits and check out the car that either broke, won, or just pulled in, and you're going to spend some time in the stands. The beautiful part of the stands typically is you can move up and down the stands. You can get a feel for the launch or the finish, especially when the cars are going over 180, 200 miles an hour. It's really neat to be down at the big end, just to experience how fast that really is. But drag racing, to get into most of these events, look, on a Friday test and tune, you can get in for 10 bucks. Some of your bigger events may cost you $20 to $30, like the NHRA stuff. But the reality is, it's very accessible, it's super engaging, it's relatively affordable, and there are a bunch. There's over 400 active drag strips still in the United States. That number astounded me because drag strips, typically the property gets so valued, they're getting bought for housing and things of that nature, but there's still over 400 drag strips. Whether it's a 1/4 mile or an 1/8 mile, drag racing checks all the marks on all the boxes. If it's something you might enjoy, if you've never been, make sure you get a chance to go to one before the drag strip around you disappears. Drag racing certainly falls in that top running for one of the best spectator sports of all time. The third type of racing, automobile racing in the United States, and this was insanely popular before 1994, was open wheel racing, or what we call Indy car racing today. Look, in 1994 or thereabouts, the whole racing thing in open wheel split. You had kart on one side and you had the Indy Racing League on the other, and they really became competitors, and it watered down the competition, but it really hurt the racing. So IndyCar and open wheel racing isn't nearly as popular as it was beforehand. The thing with IndyCar racing is it's dedicated tracks, which means there's a limited number of tracks to go to. The other thing is, much like a stock car race, you're sitting in the stands, and because Indy cars go so fast, the tracks tend to be very big. So you get a view of one part of the track from the stands, and really the opportunity to move around is limited. So your view, your access, the interaction with the racing is less. You almost never get into the pits at an IndyCar race. You're really relegated to the stands. So your interactions to see the machines, or your opportunities to see the machines and talk with the drivers, is really nil. And the other thing is, IndyCar racing can tend to be expensive. Look, tickets to these things can be anywhere from $7,500 to $100, and it's fairly pricey to get into. It's an expensive form of racing. It's good racing, but I'll tell you what, it's not really close racing. Look, if you touch open wheel cars, bad things happen. So if you're a rubbing this racing kind of guy, open wheel racing is not your thing. But before 1994, it was huge. The Indy 500 was the #1 viewed spectator sport for a long time running. More people tuned in to watch the Indy 500 than any other race up until 1994. Car racing, one form of racing, very limited as far as what you see, what you view, what you can do, but man, they sure do go fast. And the fourth and final kind of racing that we're going to take a look at is dirt track racing. Look, these things are all held on oval tracks, but there are over 700 dirt tracks in the United States, and they're all ovals. And the beautiful thing is there's a lot of dirt track, especially if you live in the southeastern parts of the world. But dirt track racing is cool no matter where you go. The diversity of cars is incredibly unique. Like, you have everything from 4-cylinder front-wheel drive cars to winged outlaws to super stocks to you name it. Every race is different. Every car handles differently, and dirt track is incredibly interactive. The races, typically they're 15 to 20 laps and are over pretty quickly. And if you've never seen a car on dirt lifting its inside front wheel while smoking the rear tires drifting through a turn, it's really something to see. And also, you typically at a dirt track, you can either park along the fences and get an up close and personal view where you get really dirty. Trust me, you want to wear goggles if you're sitting in the back of your truck watching a dirt track race from the fence. You can sit in the stands, or a lot of times you can buy pit passes and you can get inside the pits and you can see the cars, the drivers, see them working on them, talk to the drivers. And dirt track racing is solely unique. If there was ever rubbing is racing as the motto, it's dirt track racing. As a matter of fact, I was at a dirt track just this last weekend with my son where the motto there is it's a fight where a race breaks out. A lot of times that's true. Look, it's a different type of crowd, but it's a different kind of racing. In regards to all the boxes, it's interactive, it's engaging, it's cost effective. Look, if it costs us $12 to get into a race where we had 3.5 hours of entertainment, and it's diversely unique. The types of cars that get raced at the grassroots level is super cool. It doesn't matter if you're going to the pros to see the World of Outlaws or you're visiting your local track. Dirt track racing almost never fails to entertain, and it's always exciting. So how do I rank them? I rank them as the #1 spectator sports from a motorsport standpoint is no doubt dirt track racing. Look, there is nothing better than going to a dirt track, coming home a little dirty, but seeing a ton of really close racing and a whole bunch of different kind of cars. The noise these things make are simply magical. Racing under the lights with a dust just hanging in the air is pretty cool. And the best thing is to go with either your son or one of your best buddies, drink a couple cool ones and watch cars go sideways through the turns while banging the heck out of each other. Eventually someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, and someone's going to be upset. Then my second favorite, most motorsports epic type event is drag racing. Look, drag racing is completely interactive and it's affordable. I love cars and I love to understand what makes them go. I like to see what people have done. Nowhere else can you see some guy pull the cylinder heads off his motor out in the pits and start wrenching on it. At the top, the NHRA events, heck, they're rebuilding the whole engine, dropping pistons, oil pans, rods, cranks, the whole works, the blower out of these things and rebuilding them in the pits, and it's over quickly. Look, you have a new race essentially every 10 to 20 seconds. So it's incredibly interactive, and I can move up and down the track and see it all. My third favorite one, and this is where I think that it makes a lot of sense, is going to be with stock car racing. Look, NASCAR lost me a long time ago, but I still love local short track stock car racing. These are the guys that work until 6 and 7 o'clock at night that show up with an open trailer, unload them, and go out and do their best version of their favorite stock car hero. These guys are dedicated to the sport. It's good racing at the local level, and it's a lot of fun. My fourth is going to be IndyCar. It's just so limited in its approach and its aspect. If I'm stuck in the stand, and I can look, I appreciate 200 miles an hour as much as anybody else does, but the reality is I can't see the whole track. I'm in a very finite area. It's super expensive to get into, and I have to drive a long way to go see it, and they're not bumping fenders. Tends to lose a little bit of its an aspect or its allure to me. Now, I don't know how this list compares to your list. Hopefully you find it interesting and engaging and maybe even thought-provoking, but either way, we have a ton of different options when it comes to going to be a spectator at a motorsport event here in the United States. Whichever one it is, it's a good one. And to make sure you get out and support your local tracks and go cheer on your local drivers, whether it's the national, the big guys that get paid a lot of money to do it, or the guys that actually pay to do it. Either way, it's a good time, it's a fun time, it's a great way to spend a Saturday night. Guys, if you ever need parts for your American muscle car truck, please check us out at First Place Auto Parts. We have a ton of restoration performance parts for your car to make it faster, look better, or stop harder. Guys, until next time, keep the hammer down and keep it between the guardrails.